Well, I'll tell you something for nothing, lads. You're going to get a great kick out of this. This is probably my fifth or sixth take trying to record this fucking intro for this episode of the podcast. And you're going to find it ironic now as the interview plays in a few minutes. Myself and John call ourselves out on several occasions for going off on tangents. And that is exactly why I've had to retake this intro again and again and again. As soon as I go and I touch on any type of a talking point, I start talking away to myself, and then I realise I look at the recorder in front of me and I'm like, I've been talking for 5 fucking minutes. Jesus H. Christ. Anyway, you're very, very welcome to another episode of the From the Depths podcast. As always, my name is Emmett, and yeah, we are on episode 3 of the podcast. Very quickly before we kick things off this week, a very sincere and heartfelt extended thank you and gratitude to anyone who is liking and sharing and enjoying the podcast. It is very, very much appreciated, and it's a nice feeling to know that I'm recording this on a camping chair inside my room, using the shell of an old drawer unit as a table, and that it's not just being heard by myself and whoever happens to be on each week. It's nice that you're enjoying it, and I'm delighted to be able to put these together. So yeah, I've a bit of housekeeping to do before we start off this week's podcast. I'll get all the From the Depths stuff out of the way, because that seems to be the easiest way to do it. Right, if you are enjoying the podcast, if you are enjoying everything that we do in relation to From the Depths, you can keep up to date with everything to do with the podcast and everything else by following us at From the Depths Metal on Instagram. I normally just share everything to do with the podcast and the radio show, which I will touch on more in a moment. I normally share everything to do with those things on that. I also share records every now and again. If I'm enjoying a band or anything like that, like more so kind of up and coming bands, if I'm enjoying them a lot, I will try and name drop them and stuff like that too. It's a handy little space. But I must say, if you want to keep up to date with stuff relating more to do with up and coming bands and stuff like that, then I can wholeheartedly recommend that you check out our weekly radio show over on Wired 99.9 FM, Limerick's only fully licensed student radio station, and that is, of course, From the Depths, Cuts from the Crypt. It is a show I run every week over on Wired FM. It is back on the air this week. I mistakenly said it was back on air last week, and I recorded an episode last week, but that episode will be going out this Wednesday. This week's episode of the show, of Cuts to the Crypt anyway, is full of contemporary traditional heavy metal bands. Really, really enjoy putting the track list together for that. And if that's your cup of tea, if you like stuff like Ambush and like Eternal Champion and stuff like that, be sure to listen to this week's episode of the radio show Cuts from the Crypt over on Wired 99.9 FM, Limerick's only fully licensed student radio station, at 8 p.m. So yeah, looking forward to you getting to hear that. More importantly, looking forward to getting to hear this week's interview, and that interview was with Mr.Tall John, one half of Bad Reputation Ireland, who are, if you don't know, I would argue the only lads who run gigs in Limerick, but a few would probably get upset if I was to say that, and I, of course, I'm referring to metal gigs. But yeah, John is one half of the lads over at Bad Rep. If you don't know who they are, they've been running gigs in Limerick for just over 10 years. I think it's coming up on 12 years now. I can't remember when that 10-year anniversary thing was now off the top of my head. I don't have any notes in front of me. But yeah, I had great crack chatting away to John. Really, really nice guy. Very, very grateful he was actually like willing to come onto the podcast too. I had a list of names when I had the first idea of, well, no, not the first idea of putting the podcast together, but when I sat down and was like, right, I want to do a podcast, I want to interview X amount of people. I remember reading something online and it was like, write down 10 names that you want to be able to chat to, and start ticking those off bit by bit. Very, very happy to say that I have 2 of those 10 off the list already. Actually, I would say 3. One of the guests was one I wasn't expecting to be able to land, so that is the only reason that they weren't on the list. I didn't think it was possible to be able to actually speak to them. And you probably know who I'm talking about. I'm referring, of course, to Mr. Eric Bill on episode 1, which, if you want to listen back to, you can do so by finding us wherever you get your podcast from. If you found this episode, you're more than likely going to be able to find that by literally just scrolling down a small bit. But anyway, that's another episode. We're talking about this week's episode. So yeah, got to sit down with John, and this interview to date is actually one of the longest that it is the longest that we've done From the Depths. It's the longest episode so far. The interview itself clocks in at over 90 minutes. And we touch on quite a lot. I normally, when I watch podcasts and I watch interviews and stuff like that, normally they have a list of questions and talking points in front of them. I had really 3 or 4 in my head going into this, and I'm all the happier for it because I wasn't really tied down to the list of questions or anything like that. It was more of an informal conversation where we touched on a little bit of the history of Bad Reputation, gigs run Limerick, the nature of running gigs and everything like that, pre-pandemic and everything like that, and how gigs are going to come back in some way or another in a post-pandemic world too. Which of course we don't really know how, but we kind of have a few hot takes about it throughout the interview. We're just trying to figure it out as best as anyone can. So anyway, I'm after waffling, so I'll probably just stop talking now and I'll let you listen to the interview. So yeah, without me waffling any further, lads, this is the sit down interview I did with Mr.Tall John of Bad Reputation Ireland. So lads, I hope you enjoy this, and yeah, again, enjoy. Right, so lads, what's the crack? I am sitting down with Mr.Tall John from Bad Reputation. John, what is the crack, man? You will?
How's it going, Emmett? Thanks for having me.
Not a bother, man. So the first question I wanted to ask you, and I hadn't even planned on asking you this, but it's just you put up the poll there on Facebook about it on the Limerick Metal Community page there about when gigs are realistically going to be coming back and stuff like that. We had a small back and forth over Messenger about this because you're expecting the Doyle gig in June to be the first one back. But have you had a sit down with the lads inside in Dolan's, realistically planning stuff out for the coming months or anything like that at all?
We'd have phone calls with between me and either of the Dolans. It's normally Neil about stuff. And look, we're both speculating all the time. Like we're speculating since April of last year.
Yeah.
You know, March last year, phone calls were like, we'll be back in the summer. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of was like, I put all my eggs into one basket. I kind of said, oh yeah, we'll definitely be back by the summer. I can't see this lasting. And then the realization that will it come back without a vaccine kind of starts dawning on you. No, because there'll be a surge again. And the idea that they're giving it to you in little chunks so it's more digestible. So like they tell you it's 6 weeks, they tell you it's this, and then you're like, oh, it's been a year. And like that's a strategy you learn. That's basic sociology. You know, it was a strategy to kind of drip feed I think everyone knew deep down that there's not going to be anything until there's a vaccine. But now that there is a vaccine, it's just now is when you ask the question, when are we coming back? And the conversation, I must admit, I was the more pessimistic when I was talking to the Dolans about it. I said, will we be back in this year? And they're optimistic that we will. They're optimistic that we'll be back in the summer. Like, I know that is speculation. There's no, they're the same as you or I, you know, they're just waiting for the announcements. You know, they'll open the door as soon as they can. And today in particular, I really, that's the reason I put up the poll. I really, as I was sitting down doing my work, I just had admin for the first half of the day and like meetings then for the second half. But God, I miss gigs. I was like, fucking hell, I'd love a gig. And it hits me every now and again. But today, I was just like, just let the gigs come back, for fuck's sake. Please let the gigs come back.
It's even just the routine of it. Like, I don't know what it's like on your end now because you have to run it. But I went out for a quick fag just before we started this off. And just being outside, having the fag in the rain, I kind of thought about when I get off the bus now at Arthur's Quay and that walk down towards Dolan's and normally run into someone in the smoking area there and you're having your first pint. It's that routine of rushing in and out that I'm starting to miss. And it was the novelty of going to gigs at the start that in the spring we were all kind of like, oh fuck, I can't wait for gigs to come back. Now I think we're all kind of in that boat where we're like, Jesus, okay, now I actually really, really want the gigs to be back, But I was listening to one of the old episodes of the Metal Cell earlier today now, and I was kind of looking at the CD shelf. It's just up here to my right. And I know that I know Alex from Orna was asking, I might have his name wrong now off the top of my head, but they were mentioned about bands messaging you about when gigs come back and everything like that. How bad has that been this past few months on your end with like emails about gigs when they do come back, like who's going first and all that type of crack?
It's the kind of the smaller level gigs. So look, we wear the two hats with Bad Rep. We obviously have the bigger shows that we're bringing in, where we're dealing with the international agents and we're dealing with DME in Dublin quite a bit. And those emails have been consistent, like, because they have agents working for them that are moving tours across Europe collectively. So those emails only really slowed down maybe in the latter half of last year, but they're picking up. But to be honest with you, a lot of the national acts then and maybe like some of the the bands from the Isles, like as in if you're Scottish and I call them the Isles there on purpose, from across the pond. Those aren't coming in. I don't think those bands can afford to speculate at the moment. Like I know of a few bands that got stung badly because when the governments were guaranteeing the airlines, people weren't getting the money back. They were just getting vouchers, and sure those vouchers have expired already. And there was bands that had tours booked, and we've all heard the horror stories of bigger bands and smaller bands. But I think it is those smaller bands. Like there's a few bands I know that had the entire schedule for their European tour done and had all the logistics booked. And they could afford to move it once, and they moved it once, and then it was like kaput,
Yeah.
So like I didn't mean to start this pod with being doom and gloom, but I think there's almost a trepidation with kind of emerging bands, mid-level bands, and new bands about asking, is it about gigs now? So we haven't actually had. I was actually looking today. When was the last inquiry we had from a national band about a gig, and it was November, and other than organizing the live stream stuff, it's been us contacting bands.
Jesus, I never would have thought that, because I know now, like I was thinking today, and I know that there's like loads of like kind of smaller bands that have been going for a small while. They're always going to be the bands that are going to email you first about the Siege. The stereotypical, we have no shirts, nothing recorded, but let us play. I thought you'd get a few emails like that, you know what I mean? But no, when I was looking at the shelf, the big one I was thinking in my own head then is like, when the first gig, before it's announced, like when it comes to Irish acts, who would be like the first two that come to my mind are Zora and Tombs, like, do you know what I mean? And Zora had an entire Irish tour and a few UK dates cancelled, like, do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, do you give the priority to bands like that first, or if something comes your way, then like if a big international act was to come, what would you try and prioritize, like, do you know?
Yeah, it's a bit like how many times can you fold a slice of bread at the moment, because everything's getting moved back. There's a conversation I had with a few. I have a group chat with a few heads from bands, and there was a conversation had where the actual avails, like the Fridays and Saturdays in 2022, are drying up. They're being taken by the big touring acts, that want to get their shows in and stuff like that. So midweek gigs are going to become a thing, and they'll need to be properly, supported, invested in, and promoted from our side. That's not necessarily a bad thing, with Limerick being a university town. Like, I think midweek gigs every now and again could be good if they're properly priced. That could be helpful. But yeah, I suppose I've darted around answering your question about who we're giving the gigs to. I think we'll certainly be honoring some of the bands that had stuff cancelled. So Zora did get a tour cancelled. We had stuff, and they released an album. Bands that were releasing stuff or have released stuff and that got fecked over, I think they deserve more than like other bands. And anyone that begrudges them that is just a dickhead. And they deserve to kind of be in the draft a bit quicker than other bands. We'll certainly prioritize getting a few smaller shows in. Like, I think national shows will be back before touring shows are back. The whole thing is, like, if our country gets to a vaccine level, whatever the percentage is, let's not talk about that because that keeps changing whenever they're going to say that'll be fine. Then you'll have all your national bands playing. But let's just say if America's lagging behind, are we going to have the likes? Are we going to be able to fulfill that full of hell date when they come back? Is there going to be like this weird dystopian future where it'll be like these red lights will go off in the airport and the band will be shuffled off into some dark room like that? That could be just around the corner.
Yeah, I could just imagine like someone coming in now they're saying stuff about having these COVID passports, and I can imagine just someone coming through the double doors inside the warehouse and security putting down the visor or something out of Judge Dredd, like, do you know what I mean? But
I went to Russia there a few years ago, just with my wife, and the passport control there was serious. Like, it was mad. We were queuing for like 2-3 hours to get in on the passport control, and I have a vision of that being the future. And I remember I saw a door open to my left, and I was like, if I just walk through that door, I'm in Russia. And like my wife just went, if you walk through that door, you'll get shot. But like I tried to make a joke then with the passport lady, and she just wasn't having it, and she just told me to stop talking. I was like, okay.
They're
Welcome
so
to the future.
that,
That'll be
like,
Shannon Airport now in a few weeks.
Man, I'm telling you, I had a story like that going over to the States. When I went over on the way to America, like every typical Irish person, I had like 110 tea bags inside in the bag, like, but I didn't keep them in the Barry's box. I put them in, like, you know, those zipped sandwich bags, like, so all that's inside in the zip sandwich bag is like 110 tea bags. And I just happened to be the one going through the US customs part on the way in, like, you know, and I got brought into the small room and everything like that. And Jesus Christ, I'd say I was only 18, 19 years of age. And, you know, they're so used to like having someone there and getting the information out of them like that. And I knew I was coming back in August because I had to work. Do you remember the Fla Cure was on in Ennis for 2 years? And it was a year, and I was working in Glore at that stage. And I remember I was sitting down there, and your man was from, like, I think it was from Brooklyn or Queens. He had a really strong New York accent. And he was like, oh, so you're going over to Minnesota and all this? And I was there petrified. I was there and I was like, yeah. And like, you could tell how good they are at that, because he was there and he was like, oh, you're working a music event. You like music? And I was like, yeah, I like music, pure nervous. Like, and he's like, so what music do you like this? And I was like, oh, the wrong answer to this now either. Like, and I was like, oh, I like the Smiths. And he was like, the Schmitz, like this, like, and I was just kind of like, yeah. And they were like, you're grand to go through. I just thought, mother of fuck, like, you know, I'm after going on
the
off
big
on a
American artists. Tangents are the way to go. But you asked a question earlier, and I just kind of wanted to add to it, just about like my missing of gigs, and I just realized that something I've kind of just dawned on me, and I think it's dawned on a few people I've been talking to, is how in the metal world, how much a part of like in all the normies, like they go to, you know, Pilates and yoga and they have all that sort of stuff, and they do all this, like maybe they have all this normal stuff that's advertised in the telly all the time, buy, sell. But like a gig in a lot of ways is a form of therapy. It's almost cathartic, you know, and it's a de-stressor for me with work and stuff like that, that I could just go, I could be pretty much guaranteed that at least 2-3 times a month I could go to something heavy music related on the island of Ireland if I wanted to. And of those 3, I'll pick 1 probably, or 2. I think people might be less picky now. They'll be like, all right, I'll go to it. Who is it? Lad clatter in a bin going through a reverb pedal. Yeah, grand, I'll go to it.
And you know, I was only thinking about that. I remember, was it 2017 when Aborted played Limerick? And I remember going to that, and I was so fucking upset that there was fuck all people there for it. Now I know there was, it was ridiculous, like, and that was the thing that annoyed me the most about that. And I'd be getting back to what you just said there now, is just kind of like, there was probably about 20-30 of us inside in the warehouse. That was a big artist inside in the warehouse. Like, they had just released Terrorvision. They were getting all these rave reviews and like Metal Hammer, Kerrang, you know, all those type of things.
And Cryptopsy were supporting them. Like.
Yeah, that was another thing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and there was fuck all people there. And I was just kind of like, I was thinking about that earlier, because I was like, imagine now if that, I remember that was November when that gig happened. If that was this coming November and the same lineup was there, the warehouse would probably be packed. And it wasn't like there was anything huge clashing with that. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't know what the story was with that, but I do think something like that probably is a lot less likely to happen again in the future. Like,
that every now and again there's an anomaly of a show, anomaly of a show that comes along, and that was one of them. And like, if it was 5 or 6 years ago when a show like that happens, those shows happen at least once a year. There's 1 or 2 shows a year where things don't go right, and you're just kind of, you're holding the pot, like, you know, you're like, fuck. Now, as long as it's 1 or 2, it's fine. But that one, we were all kind of like, what is going on? And I can say it on this, like, as in, I know that sales weren't particularly good for that show in Ireland overall, and Limerick was dire. And it was a great lineup. It's not like, like, let's call it spade a spade. I'm a promoter, but if I just put on the type of music that I like, then it would be very few shows. Now, I like all metal music to a certain extent, obviously, bar 1 or 2 horrible genres, which I won't mention in case somebody gets upset.
Sure, mention them anyway. Sure, look, they're going to get upset either way. Like,
But a show like that has marquee level, it has credentials and stuff like that. You get people making excuses, and you can literally just have like the predictive text excuse, which is, oh, bad time of year, Christmas, blah. Oh, it's just after Halloween, it's just after Siege, blah. And you're like, well, you could make an excuse at any time of year, bad time of year, summer holidays.
Yeah.
you can just say whatever you can justify it. And if you want to know the most annoying conversation I have, like, I'm always annoyed at those shows if there's somebody there, and I have two eyes and I can see, and I've been watching the ticket sales, so I know it's bad. But when somebody comes up and tries to explain to you why it's bad in their, pub logic, I just love to have a checklist and go, let's see what they're going to say.
Yeah.
With that one, look, yeah, like, because if we're talking about shitty ones, that one, like, I think the gig was good. I like Cryptopsy. Cryptopsy were great. That's another tour that was going to happen, but it's disappeared into the ether now with COVID by themselves. I don't know what's happening with that. That could be, I don't know where it's gone. That's a long time ago. Like, there's so many shows that are just like, if you ask me and I just do, I don't know, because it's just, it was like, they're defined as cancelled, but these bands will still need to tour, so are they coming back? What are they doing? Yeah.
I was watching I don't know if you follow it, there's a YouTube channel called Sea of Tranquility, and it's just basically a load of older lads just talking about like gigs and stuff like that. A fella, Pete Pardo, hosted, but they had Brian Slagle from Metal Blade on it. They do this kind of forum episode, kind of like the Metal Cells forum, but they did that last Monday, and he was saying that, like, they have 101 artists on that label, but they've said touring wise they're not touching anything until at least January, February next year, like, do you know what I mean? So, like, I do think it's going to be a case where, like, you have people saying that, like, oh, they're mad for gigs and everything like that. This is going to be the test now, is 2022, when there's so much going on, where people are going to be like, oh, fuck, okay, it's going to be a case that there might be 5 gigs on the one week and I need to pick 2 out of them, But one thing I wanted to ask you really quickly, though, was now that you've had this kind of extended break from running gigs, has there ever been a time or ever been a situation while you've been running an event with bad rep where you've kind of thought, something, fuck this now, this isn't worth it? Like, has there ever been like a situation where you have like external things related to the gig kind of mounting on, like, ridiculous pressures and demands from people, and you've kind of been like, something, myself and Kieran, we're only 2 lads, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Hasn't happened in a while. It definitely happened, like, as in, it can bruise your pride quite a lot. And I've talked to promoters that have, and I've nothing against them, but I've talked to promoters that have packed it in, that, like, the financial burden can be ridiculous at points. But then it only takes 1 or 2 good shows for you to forget the bad ones. You're like, oh, Jesus, everything's great.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a livelihood down this side of the country. You definitely need to have a job, an actual job, and you do this as a side, unless you're doing 5 or 6 mixed genre gigs a week, and even then you might be struggling, like, because it is, look at the population of Limerick. Have I thought of packing it in at points, at gigs in particular? Yeah, I have. I think you'll struggle to, like, the big 3 or 4 promoters in Ireland. I think every single one of them, because we would have, once you get past a certain amount of years doing this sort of stuff, there's kind of a common ground you can have conversations about. Now, I know we'll never be near the level that they're at with DME in Dublin, but we've all talked about, oh, Jesus, it'd be great to pack it in sometimes, wouldn't it? Because at certain shows, you get the vibe, it's just whatever it is. I don't know. If you meet somebody, they might say it's astrology or the stars lining some way, but there's some shows where even everyone's in a bad humor, and you're like, why are people coming out when they're in a bad humor? And everything filters through you as a focal point. So if a band is in a bad mood, filters through you. The venue owner is in a bad mood, goes through you. And then it just takes one person having a bad fucking night, and you might just, snap at them, and you're like, oh, Jesus, And when I see it happening with other promoters, you need to be converted to understand it, because I've never seen the average punter understand it or a band understand it, because it's a completely different type of pressure to I don't know, wade through. But the short answer after that long answer is, it's maybe been 4 or 5 years since I've thought of that. I think I'm going to come back a bit more patient when I come back, because I've been a victim of this. The whole culture of instant responses and all that sort of stuff these days, I absolutely despise. I despise it,
Yeah.
but I kind of lost sight of the fact that I despised it. So I was there going, why haven't they replied to an email in 42 seconds? So yeah, just a bit more patient, I think, is the approach.
Yeah, but what was I even going to say there? With like, do you mind going on a small bit about like, because I know I wanted to bring this up at some point. Myself and Jack interviewed you. I'd say was it 2016, 2017,
And
and we were
dude, that was a
just
fantastic interview. I really
oh,
enjoyed that.
oh Jesus, man, I don't know. Well, I remember. I don't know why this sticks out in my mind. For whatever reason, we didn't know what to ask at the end, and we were there, and we were just kind of throwing names out of the hat. We were like this so typical of our age at the time now, but we're like, oh, are Enforcer ever coming to Limerick? Or Anvil ever coming to Limerick? You know. But one thing I needed to mention to you about that was we found that interview recently, and it was kind of a big reason I wanted to have you on early on in the series, because I was like, right, I want to make up now for 18-year-old
No,
Emmett's
I
interview.
loved that interview. I thought it was great.
Oh well, it's up on the radio show's Mixcloud, but we had it was part of a college project. We had to do it. One of the lads that was involved in it, he was just never coming into college, and we hounded him one day. We were like, "Look, we've done the whole show. You just need to piece this interview together, like in post or whatever." And it was supposed to be a 60-minute episode of the radio show, and what he ended up doing was he left the whole 40 minutes or half hour of the interview in, and we gave him like this instrumental black metal music to put in the background, you know, typical thing for radio. But the fucker, for whatever reason, put in the theme song to Harry Potter. So if you listen back to that, if you listen back to the interview now, you can just hear Jack just going, and now we're sitting back with Tall John, and just really quietly, it's just dun, 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 and we're just like, we didn't find that out until the thing aired either, like, do you know what I mean? So we were like, oh bollocks. But anyway, going back to the questions, do you mind going on a small bit about, do you know, the whole, like you were saying, a lot of us punters and lads and bandits won't get this. What's the process like for you when you're approached by a band? Like, do you have to pay a guarantee if they come towards you? Like, do you have to pay like a guarantee type of thing to give them a kind of insurance? Like, do you have to put anything financially towards it from the get-go?
So yeah, you're rarely approached by the band directly. Do you want to? Are you talking at which level? Are you talking the bigger international acts?
Yeah, I wouldn't really be with Irish bands. Like, if let's say, do you know the way sometimes that you and the guys in GME, but you both have the same show going. Do you both get approached? Do one of you get approached and then you collab in it, or what's the story there?
It's a mix there. It's mainly DME gets approached. Like that's the look. That's the H is the gatekeeper for those shows in Ireland. Them coming in, and there he'd offer some shows and he can't do. And in fairness, he's been very good to us, excellent to us over the years, with offers and stuff like that. And I look at the shows and see if they're feasible. Then, like, as in, I do have to, like, you know, the mind, the head is to rule the heart on some occasions. Like a few years ago, and I'll give you this one, we were offered In Solitude, and I'm a massive In Solitude fan. Like, I'm a huge In Solitude fan. Love them. And at the time, they were only, I think they just released the World of Flesh and the Devil. So they weren't big. It was Sister that made them, the next album that made them big. But I love that the World of Flesh and the Devil album. I think it's like, and this will, I might as well say something controversial. I think it gives any Iron Maiden album a run for its money. But I just had to go, like, it's not going to work. Like, I could do this for myself, but the band will be pissed off because there'll only be like 30 people at the show because they're not that well known at this point. Now, if I got offered them after Sister, I'd have probably done them because they were suddenly cool and trendy and all this. And, you know, there was enough of an underground buzz about them. And they were playing the main stages of festivals then, albeit at noon, but I could have done them. So, like, there's shows like that over the years, but like that one, it's the agency. There's loads of agencies, like, and they do multiple genres. There's one specifically for lots of metal bands. Like, it's great. I think it's funny, and I listened to your podcast with Dahi, and when I listen to other people's podcasts, when they list bands that they like, in my head, I'm like, oh, they're all with that agency. They're all with that. And I'm like, how does it happen? Like, as in, you're saying about them all being on certain labels, but I'm in my head going, they're all with that agency. They're all with that agency. And there is, like, as in, a good agent gets them places. So yeah, once H makes initial contact for the bigger ones, he like there was guarantees paid. Yeah, we do guarantees. Not you never pay the whole lot up front, and like there's snake oil salesmen in this game as well. Like I do get at least 20% of the emails I get a year would be, I'd be like, now, and generally that you can smell that from a mile away. And when you think somebody is a chancer, like I'll mail H or I'll mail James in Belfast, or I sometimes Con in Cork, and I'll go, do you know anything about this? Do you know anything about this guy? And I know a few lads in Scotland as well. And I just like, and they'd be like, oh, stay away, don't do that. Whoa, stay away from that. And I've been asked for advice then in the other capacity, like, as in like, hey, we got offered this, and I'm like, whatever you do not pay that amount of money for that show. You will be fleeced. So look, everyone is trying to, how do I put this delicately? Everyone is trying to get the best deal for them. That's basically it. But by certain marquee bands, there's certain bands that when you get offered them, you just go, that's what they're asking for. That's they're getting. Cannibal Corpse, Corrosion of Conformity, that sort of stuff. When Napalm Death, when those bands, when they have a pedigree of that level, you just have to go with what's like Amana Martin, Behemoth and the Castle. You weren't negotiating there. Like you're just like, right, what is this we're doing? And that's not. Then I would get contacted by bigger like international ones as well. So I do like. I get back to at the moment. I'd look in the emails. We get the generic emails of tours that are on offer. What's really annoying is that when they say these bands are willing to play the UK, and you're just kind of going, they do know this isn't the UK, don't they? And but then like there's the smaller bands, like as in I love when I get an email from like this is a particular like I know always puts a smile on my face when you get an email from a band that you've probably just started listening to in the last 6 or 7 months that are new enough band, and they're emailing you trying to introduce their band. And you're reading the email going, this is so sweet. And you're trying to play the game that you don't know who they are, but you know who they are. And there's been a few like that. That's been great. Like the Memoriam that came over last year, and I'm trying to get them back over. Was that last year? Jeez, no, it wasn't. That was 2019. I forget the 2020.
Jesus, actually, it was just over a year ago. Yeah, that was September 2019.
Yeah. And hopefully they'll come back. But it's direct contact with them I had. So, because that's just how it happened. There's some bands that go abroad and tour. Like if the likes of, this has happened in a nice few ways. So like when 10 Ton Slug play a festival or something like that, they'll be talking to someone. And somebody we're known at this stage, which is nice. Like as in the Siege is known, Bad Rep is known. And they'll kind of just start talking about shows this side of the country, and stuff like that, and we'll come up. And then Sean or Ronan will come back and be like, oh, this band wants to play Ireland. They'll be in touch. And I'll generally, like, there's been a lot of bands that have played the Siege based on that kind of communication happening. And that's happened, like it's happened with Sharborn, with Zella Cult, like a number of bands that were due to play the October Siege that was gone, never happened, never got announced. There was a load of bands that were confirmed via Zella Cult and Damon. Do you know Damon?
They're like the black and thrash band. They play Monolith as well. Yeah,
there was a load of bands confirmed through the two of them and Damon themselves. And sure, that got pissed into the wind anyway. So
yeah. But it's funny you mentioned Napalm Death a few minutes ago. I was told this a few years ago. There was of course the rumor about Napalm Death due to be playing years before they came in 2017. Bernie addressed that on stage and stuff like that. There's been a few rumors and stuff like that about bands supposed to be coming to Limerick and stuff like this. But the reason I asked you about like whether or not you have to pay guarantees for bands and stuff like this was I was told this, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago. I was in Arthur's Quay. I mightn't have even been 18 yet, but I don't know if this was a bunch of the Doom boys that are into like the sludge stuff or whatever, just making this up on their own head, or whether it actually happened. They told me that there was a rumor that Electric Wizard were due to play Limerick a few years ago, and that the only reason that they didn't play it was that they asked for a copious amount of weed before the gig. And like, I remember being like 17, 18 and being like, I don't think that's how adults operate. Like, do you know what I mean?
No.
But was there any truth to that at all? Like,
Not to that at all. That's
yeah.
and I actually have an idea where that story, like knowing the heads in Limerick because it is a fucking parish. You kind of, and knowing who you know, I have a feeling I know where that story came from.
You
Uh,
know exactly who it was now, like, do you know.
but yeah, that's talking like that isn't good for a podcast. Talking about, you know, that guy, you know that guy. No, the Electric Wizard, I had approached them to play Limerick before, but they couldn't do it. Like they hit a level at some point in around 2012, 2013. That time they played Dublin, many. They played Whelan's. I was at that show in Whelan's. Everyone says they're at that show in Whelan's. I was there, and I have a T-shirt from it as well. But the thing is, well, I was only, I was young enough. When I was at that show in Whelan's, I bought the last T-shirt they have, and it was a size small. I was like, why? Why did I buy this? But I had approached them. I approached them and Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, I think, within the same 6 or 7 months. They were on the same agency at the time. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of the agency. It'll probably come to me now in a while. I was hopeful that I'd get one of them. Like, as in, there's lots of near misses. Like, I thought there was one or two bands I thought you were going to say, and I was like, oh, he knows about that. Yeah, the Electric Wizard was a band I would have liked to have, but I think now if we got them, we probably have to look at it. I think they don't play that cap venue. I think they're in the thousands now. And that's where Limerick is weird and Deal Ireland is weird. We lack, like Dublin has a few 1,000 capacity venues, 2,000 capacity, 3,000. But like, let's put it this way: the Castle capacity venue for that show in summer 2019, that was considered a small cap gig for that was the smallest cap gig they were doing.
Jesus.
Mart, I believe. That was cool venue. That's why they all were on board. But Ireland lacks these mid to just below 3 arena level size venues. Like, it's, you play the Olympia, grand, you have to make a huge bloody jump to the 3 arena if you're a band to do it. And yeah, everyone's like, oh, the 3 arena, you can move the seats in and out for the capacity. You're still talking multiple thousand people, multiples of thousands. I forget the exact number there.
Yeah. It's noticeable too, though, when bands that aren't ready to play the 3 arena play it, because when you go to gigs like that, and then the upper tier is completely empty, bar a few pensioners, and there's probably only the bones of maybe 1,500 actually in the floor space. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think it all goes back to population density, though. Do you know what I mean? Because it's kind of awkward. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know where you would actually put that in Ireland. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, would it be able to constitute one in Limerick? Would it get used enough to constitute it being there? Like, you do have the milk market space, but is that even over it? Like, would you fit even
it's
over
1,200.
So. Oh, okay, yeah.
And we looked at doing a tour there as well. Like, we had some, man, the near misses we've had over the years are fucking mental. Yeah, like, as in, there was meant to be a big one. I'll just say it was a big death metal package that was meant to happen in the milk market. And that tour got pulled. The entire tour got pulled, not just because they were playing the milk market, but that was cool. And that one is open there. The problem with the milk market is decibel limit, and this is a funny thing because you have a background in sound. When people are saying, "Oh, that's very loud," it's very loud. It's not that it's very loud. Everything has the same decibel limit. All gigs have the same decibel limit. It's just the consistency of the beat that's annoying you, and the type of beat. Like, so when somebody's very loud, you're like, no, it's exact same volume as any other gig. It's just consistency.
I had that happen when I ran that Summer Slaughter York like 2 years ago. Your man Brendan that owns Tom Steele's in town, like, there's a housing estate maybe, I'd say 20, 30 meters away from it, like, do you know what I mean? But before the first band finished, he kept asking me to go in and out, and I was having to walk all the way and trying to explain exactly how you just explained that there, like, you know. And he kept having me walk all the way from Tom Steele's into the estate, and he'd be shouting down, "Can you hear it?" And I'm just there, just kind of like, but no, you can just kind of hear that. You can hear like the kick drum. It's about it, but it's faint. You know? But it's an awkward one, like, do you know what I mean? But Anyway, I'll go back to my list of questions because there was one thing I
Two,
wanted to
sorry.
ask you. But no, it's more
Tangent
about
king. I'm the tangent king.
I'm just as bad. So the two of us together now doing
Yeah.
this is just an appetite for destruction, like, you know. But one thing I wanted to ask you about was the kicking and streaming live streams that you did, and you did the one there with Zaylock Cults and a few more bands. I think that was like the last Friday before Christmas. Yeah, and it looked brilliant. It looked great. I watched a few of those now that Dawn's put together. Like they had Hazy Haze doing one and stuff like that as well. And like, you know, Michael O'Donoghue, he did his one of Citrus Fresh for the album launch. That was brilliant. You've said in the past that you've intentions to bring the kicking and streaming thing back. Have you any date in mind for that?
It's like, yeah, it's like how long is a piece of string? Because like we hadn't planned for not having gigs this long. Like this, so now we are going to probably bring it back. We won't do it. The first series was the production level was very ad hoc. Not this is leaving out the one at Christmas there, which was production masterclass and was fantastic.
Oh Jesus, yeah, that looked fantastic.
So if we bring it back, we want to have it, like having it at that level is too expensive. That was thankful to the Arts Council and to the people who donated. That was covered by the one at Christmas. So if we bring back kicking and streaming, we want to have basically a lighter version of that as production level. Like the first series, the production level was two AliExpress cameras, I'm pretty sure. Now, I was happy with it at the time. It was great, but I can't put the bad rep name to another series at that level, you know. And none of the bands complained about it because it was fun, and not many people complained about it. Like it was like watching something in the 90s, which is fine, you know.
Yeah.
And the audio is crystal. Everyone, like when anyone was ever talking about it, they were like, it sounded great. And you're like, yeah, you're just avoiding it looked bad. It sounded great. Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, we want to do it again. Those things are fairly quick to get together, and we'll do it for charity again because there's no sense. I think like if nobody's making profit of it, like this is what we to work out. If we can work out a way to get a production crew in, get that covered, and have the rest all go to charity, which is if anyone has any ideas, please send me an email. But and hopefully somebody listening is going to volunteer their services. But yeah, I'd like to do maybe 2 or 3 more of those, and so does Kieran. There's a few bands that were lined up for them that couldn't do them for a multitude of reasons. Besides, like it is putting pressure on bands as well, particularly now. So let's just say we're preempting. We're going to go out of level 5,000 into level 3,000 in sometime in February, but we're only guessing. Yeah. And bands aren't allowed practice at the moment, so they can't practice for the gig. So we basically have to move fast when it comes back. As in, this is the sickening thing. We had gigs planned for when they initially, I actually forget when it initially came back. When the gigs initially come back in Dolan's? Was it August, September?
Yeah, they did the Seaton ones inside in Dolan's for a spell.
We had 2 or 3 of those lined up. Now they were only they were like, look, we do the tribute shows as well, but we had a few tribute metal bands lined up, and they were all on the books. It's just like that. And you don't even have to explain it to the bands anymore. You just go, sure, look. And it's gone. But like as soon as we can come back, I think seated shows should come back. Like what we're saying, I think seated shows may come back this year. And yeah, seated metal shows are not fun. But I will take that over nothing for the time being.
And do you know,
if they come back, we'll do it.
The one thing because I was thinking about that when they announced, I know Denise Chila did like 3 matinee shows in one day for one of those. And I remember I ran into Dahi. He was down, his girlfriend lives in Ennislake, and we were having a few cans out her back garden. And this would have been around that same time. And I remember we were talking about that, and we were just imagining in our mind, like, have a few, like, have like 10 Ton Slug headline and 2 local bands supporting or something like that. But you know that there's always going to be the one fucker who gets overexcited, and he'd be getting up out of the chair, and there'd be the poor Dolan's crowd. He'd be like, "Oh no, will you sit back down?" And he'd be like, "Oh, I'm staying in my space. It's all right." Do you know what I mean? So it is a difficult one, even at that. Like, you know.
Yeah. Have you seen Dolan since the last year at all? Have you been in there?
No, I've seen the upstairs in photos. It looks beautiful. It looks really, really
It's
nice.
the photos don't do it justice. We're gonna like when that siege does come back, and here's the interesting thing: you were watching the Metal Cell one. You said you watched it. Like
Yeah.
at that one, at the forums one, I said I think we'll be back in October. I'm now of the opinion that we mightn't. Like, saying that's it's not to be a killjoy. Like, I'm just calling a spade a spade here. I don't think a normal siege could be back in October. I think we might be able to run something in October. So now I'm putting it all down to Easter. So let's cross fingers and toes here. Always at the siege, there's that point where there's the community element and the whole fact that people just like having the chats out in the smoking area. Now the smoking area is phenomenal. If it's a sunny day outside it's going to be hard to get people into it, which is why I'm going to be like, nah, just go in and watch the fucking bands. Now, but I have assurances from the Dolans that it's all not going to be used as a smoking, and they can't because it's a huge space. They've quadrupled, if not, more so. Like, as in, it's massive. The amount of space there's up there.
Didn't they put a roof over where the downstairs smoking area? It wasn't a smoking area before they closed again.
Yeah, but they've gone out to it's hard to explain, and this is, I suppose, talking about this is a boring podcast, but it's got because you're like build the building podcast with Emmett. They've gone out to the right, and it's just a big. It's basically 4 times the floor space now, and you can kind of walk around the corner and see out to the river now, out and outside. There's so much space up there, it'll be hard. But what it will be cool for is it will have, and it was. Johnny from Malthusian said before that Dolan's, when it's like at the siege, has a Roadburn vibe, and even more so now, just the ability to hang out, particularly if we do a 2-day one, the ability to kind of hang around if bands aren't playing, if it's a nice day, is a lot nicer. You don't have to be like, okay, I'm in a crammed venue and I can't do anything, but like, let's just say it's a more spaced out day, that you can just go upstairs and relax in the sun, as in, it's like, that's the dream, we kind of want to people to enjoy, how do I put this, we kind of want people to enjoy coming to Limerick 2 or 3 times a year for gigs, not just coming to Limerick for the siege. Do you get me?
Yeah.
Because like everyone comes to Limerick for the siege, and lots of people love Dolan's, the actual venue, but now it's kind of got that extra, I suppose, sheen on it with the upgrades and everything like that. And we're told they're doing more upgrades. That I'd like to think that we'll get more people traveling. Like, we always get Cork and Galway for the shows. Yeah. People coming up for our shows, the bigger shows, obviously. I'd like to think that we can get more of the West Coast to travel for it now, because I know you're a Clare man, I'm a Clare man, but I love Limerick. I've lived most of my life here, and I just like when Limerick has a win, even, and not the mainstream nice sheen feckin', I'm not going to name the bands, but those bands that are always advertised from Limerick kind of gigs or events or stuff like that. The stuff that's always the same stuff we put forward is like rugby, blah, blah, blah. I like when, something underground, something a bit gritty, something a bit challenging, and like, everything about heavy metal is challenging. So, and people need to see it. When the Castle gig was on, there was 2,000 people in the city, 2,000 people dressed in black, and you couldn't ignore it. Like,
it was brilliant. Even walking around the city that day, like.
Yeah, there was a right vibe. Like, like, why is there so many people that look like this here? And I was delighted because, did you hear it? There was no Garda reports afterwards of any violence. There was nothing like that.
They did sorry, go on.
I guarantee you there was a church group meeting somewhere that went like, there's going to be lots of fires and bins and stuff, it's terrible. And that they were all prayer circles. And there was a bit of that, and it was absolutely hilarious. I was like, what? Is this like the Satanic Panic again? And like, is this our version of it? Or mini version of it? And like, there was a little bit of worry that it was going to be cancelled for all of 10 minutes. And I just remember, like, when your man, that counsellor, was on the radio talking about cancelling their travel visas, I was literally on my phone looking at an email saying that they were already in the country. I was like, what sort of positioning, what sort of what's the word even for, like, as in posturing is this from someone, like, he knows that he's not going to win that fight. He's just doing it. It was just
to show a
electioneering.
face. He just wanted to be doing it totally. Like, no, it was very similar to. I was explaining this to my old lad. Now we went to see Sabbath together in 2017, and you know that was a very similar case where everywhere you walked in Dublin, there was someone in denim and black and leather and all that type of crack. I remember rushing in the car after work. I work in the €2 shop in Ennis, like part time outside of college. And I remember, like, I finished up at 6:30, and I remember texting one of the boys. I was like, "I need you to drive me into Limerick now. If I go and I wait for that bus, I'll." 2 seconds. My headphones are after dying out. May just give me 2 seconds now. I need to replace them with something. Oh wait, no, it is working. Sorry. I have these, like, fucking. I'm such a tech phobe. I have these Bluetooth headphones and they're plugged into something and it goes power off, but I can still hear myself, so it's okay. Yeah, and I'm running a podcast somehow. Like, do you know what I mean? This makes no sense. Like, but speaking of the castle and everything like that, you were saying to Richie a few months ago on the Metal Cell how much of an absolute arsehole it was putting it together. Do you ever see something like that happening again? Or are you in a position where, like, do you know, something that was too much, the workload for that was a bit much?
I see shows of that level happening again. Whether they're in the castle is and that's your exclusive. I'd say I'd be more. It's more than likely, like, that there would be a big, like, let's just put it this way. It was planned for this summer to a big metal show, based on some trial runs that were happening last year for other genres in bigger venues. So in Limerick. So whether it's the castle or not is an actually aside to me. We've done that. We've done a gig in the castle. Yeah, if the opportunity comes up again and the things are working the right way, then we'll do it again. Like, but the castle is a medieval castle, and people, like, forget that they just open the doors. Everything else you have to bring in, like, as in you have to bring everything else in and all the insurance that comes with it. Like that pyro license thing, that was gas. Driving, I was driving up to the castle I think it was about 8 a.m. And I was walking across the courtyard of the castle to meet the head sound. Well, he was the Dolan's head engineer for the day, who's Liam, lovely man, with the pyro license in my hand first, because we just got it sent through.
Yeah.
And I could see the fire officer walking in from the left, and it was the matter of, not running, but trying to do that fast walk and just passing it off. So it was there was I have lots of stories to that day, and I'm not even sure. Like, I've told some of them, I haven't told all of them. So it kind of, things tweak my memory sometimes. It was the most surreal day I've had. Like, I had to go, and I won't name the band member, but I had to go buy fucking Preparation H for a certain band member at one point. And I met a load of metalers in around there, because I went to the O'Sullivan's that was near, it was like across the bridge of the castle. I drove over because I wasn't drinking all day. I drove over, pulled in, and they were just walking past, and I couldn't tell them what I was doing. They're like, "Oh man, what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I was just going to get it." And I just go in and get it, like, as in, but it was, here I am, heavy metal Preparation H.
You should have freaked him out, ran back out after him. Oh yeah, just sorting this for the boys now, like,
Yeah. Can't rock without this up your ass. But I know it was. I think we want to keep it going, and that's consistency is important for Bad Rep and for me, and that's where we are where we're at. And I am conscious, and it's a credit to you, like, as in, I've done a few podcasts now, and I generally ask questions in the same wheelhouse about where a bad rep comes from. But anyone that's listened to those podcasts has heard that. But what I kind of try and get across always is that I don't generally, like, I like telling stories about the past and anecdotal stories and stuff like that, about gigs and stuff like that. And the castle, I certainly will talk about a lot, because, look, I could dine out in it for a while. But I don't want to become one of those lads that's constantly like, remember back in the day, doing that, and constantly, because there's enough of them. There's a fucking enough of them. But to kind of keep doing shows, like, as in, to think about bigger shows, to push for stuff, and it is pushing, because we're a hinterland on we're like on the edge of Europe, And when people come to Ireland, when bands come to Ireland, big bands, they don't know about Limerick City. They know about Dublin. They know about Belfast. Often they know about Cork. We've done a good job of shutting Cork up, though. I have to get in that there because he was so Cork. I was like, yeah. And the metal cell is so Cork. Cork's great. Oh, Cork. Cork is lovely and great. But yeah, we're the heavy metal capital this side of the country.
Oh, that's it. The only win I'll ever give Cork is that time that they got Belwich. That's the only win I'll let Cork.
That was offered to Limerick.
Oh, was it?
We couldn't do it. Yeah, we couldn't do it. It was too close to Christmas, and
shit,
it was all booked out. And I know Con, like I say everything about Cork in jest, and anyone that gets offended about that and writes me death threats should probably check themselves. But I remember, like, he emailed about that, and he was putting it together because he put that tour together, and I think he nearly didn't have a venue either because it was just the time Cypress Avenue was closed down for renovations. It was literally the week before it, so he was in luck. And they were playing in front of the old. Were you at that Cork gig?
No, I couldn't at work. I couldn't get down because I would have had to get up and down. I don't drive, you see, so I couldn't rely on the buses for it.
If you're ever stuck and I'm going to Cork, I'll give you a lift.
Nice.
The stage was gone. The stage was there, but there was this big curtain billowing behind it. And I should know enough people in Cork that at the end of the show, they went, look behind there. And the new Cypress, you've seen it, is a colossus. But he couldn't, I think there was this point where that show mightn't have gone ahead there, but that's not his fault. But it went ahead. It was a great show, really good show. And they did it in a really tiny. Here I am talking about another promoter shows. Fucking hell. They did it in a really tiny venue in Dublin. But I really enjoyed that Belwich show, and we got offered that tour. And see, the last kind of two years. Sorry, well, I'm counting. Yeah, so 2020, the last year. 2 years. It feels like longer. There were shows that were going to happen. So there was one that had Belwich linked in with it. And so excited about it. That's gone as well. They're a band I certainly want to get back. Yeah,
that'd be great. Yeah, I think a lot of people in Limerick, especially now, would be mad keen to see that come to Limerick.
Yeah, and I was just going to do it in the Casbah because it would have been perfect in there. But it was Christmas party season, so maybe it was Specsavers or somebody having their Christmas party and they had the venue book, so you couldn't get a venue anywhere. I even looked at some venues. We're fairly loyal to Dolan's, but I have looked at other venues from time to time. It's mainly for the consistency of quality you get in Dolan's. But I did look at other venues and nowhere. They were all taking in the Christmas money. So you're like, do you want to cancel your Christmas party and have really out there doom band play an entire album that maybe 30 people will be at? Yeah, do that. And it's a weeknight, so they won't be drinking.
There was
a good few heads from Alex and Toombs was down with that. I drove down with I'm going to tell this story. I drove down with John Quill, Third Island John Quill, Mick Lee from Dark Matter, and Kieran Cullen, Sharborn, Bad Rep, We Come in Pieces. Yeah. I might as well give them all their credentials. And I was the driver, so I wasn't drinking. So the fucking lads got tanked in the car on the way down. They hadn't bought drink yet, so we pulled in at a petrol station, and John bought a bottle of really shit wine because he didn't think he had enough cans. And all the lads are kind of this kind of apocalypse drink buying vibe, which was horrible because I was like, God, I'd love a fucking pint. And we got to Cork, and I'm the only driver in that lot. They're all like non-drivers. So, and the worst thing about people non-drivers that are drinking is they start becoming, backseat drivers very quickly.
Oh, Jesus, so, there's nothing worse.
They didn't, for the whole way down, they were fine. But we parked up in Cork. We go to the gig anyway. They're all having a holly jolly time, but it's the type of gig where it's sobering, because it's so slow and miserable. Like, I equate it to kind of probably I'd love to have seen Warning, but I equated to a Warning gig probably. And Actually, Kieran told us that when he was in college, he used to, before a night out to get psyched up, listen to Warning. I was like, oh, we were laughing at that. What a band to get psyched up to. stick on Warning there and have an old cry. But we were coming, so the gig went on, everything like that, and so many people from Limerick was around there at it, and there was a guy talking through the entire fucking gig. I mean, the entire thing.
Yeah.
The entire thing. And because none of the lads would talk, would tell him to shut up. And I just went, fuck it, I don't. So I waited till, like, because we're playing the whole album and the songs don't really end, they just kind of go into like I just turned around a quiet part and went, will you just shut up? And because it was so quiet, the entire venue heard me. I was like, okay, God. And then I realized as I turned around, I know him from, like, I'm not going in a band, but he was in a band. I was like, fuck. Because I hadn't looked back. But look, even his friend came up and went, thanks for telling him to shut up. Because he had a right being his bonnet then. But I couldn't get him to shut up. He just kept talking.
Yeah.
But when we were going back then, the lads were tanked. And if you're driving in Cork is a hellhole to drive in. And all of them were giving me different directions. We ended up driving down a fucking one-way hill with bollards at the end of it. And like a hill that was like a 45-degree angle. We ended up driving down that because they told me it was under all their 3 versions of Google Maps that this was the way to go. Why was I listening to them? And then the 3 of them wouldn't get out of the car. I'm trying to reverse up the hill backwards. 3 of them wouldn't get out of the car, so I kicked them all out, drove up the road a few hundred meters, made them all walk up after me. There you go.
It's gas that you mentioned Kieran, and it'd be remiss of me not to mention him at some point throughout the interview. Like I was saying at the start, I went back and I listened to a lot of stuff that you'd like, interviews and stuff like that you've done. One thing you've never been asked, and I'd be very interested to find out, how did yourself and Kieran actually meet? Considering that you've worked together now in this capacity for over a decade now, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll tell the proper version here. Me and Kieran met due to a bad, so it's Riddlers, I'll say it now because it's gone, where there was a bad owner there, who double booked us for events, and my event started before his event. So I was running, and I saw you putting up about running metal nights and stuff like that, and I'd love to see them coming back. I was running a metal night there, and it was called Trash Nation, I think. It was a bit more on the new metal side of things. I won't lie, I'll never cover up stuff like that. But it was popular, and I had booked in for months. But I believe Kieran's version of events too, because he had a gig booked in, and they were literally at cross ends. But mine started before his, so I was in the venue. People were at my event. It had started, and they were having fun, and everyone was having fun. And then this guy who I'd never met in my life just came up and went, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And I was like, "I'm running an event." And we were, the venue owner was kind of at the time, because the Riddlers had many venue owners. His approach was, they're getting at each other, so I'll just let it happen. And neither me or Kieran, we were very young. Like I were younger. I'd say I was, Jesus, was I 18? Probably I was 18, I think. Kieran was 8. We're the same age, Kieran and me. So he was 18 too. So we were just roaring heads off each other, kind of saying, "No, I'm here before you, blah, 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 blah." So venue owner then, who was in the wrong, but at the time we thought, oh great, he's resolved it. Just says that I finish an hour earlier and Kieran starts an hour late, which wasn't ideal for either of us, and less ideal for him because he had bands waiting outside, and there's this venue full of lads just fucking dancing. And that's how we met. But I'd already done gigs in Nesters at the time, and he'd come to 1 or 2 of them. And I didn't know him from then, but we didn't talk then for a while. And Shane Horan, who is in Cork now, whatever he's doing there, I don't know. Why would you live in Cork? Anyways, I like Cork. He sent me a message saying, "You're doing this sort of thing." I was getting annoyed with doing shows, like not having the right people to work with, and that's not against the people I was working with. But I was like, I was very young. I didn't know a lot of stuff. like as in I was very green, extremely green behind the ears. I wasn't sure who isn't at 18. And he got us together. I'd say we were 19 at that point. But that was the first time me and Kieran had sat in a room since we'd had that argument at Riddlers. And we actually clicked pretty much straight away. We were fine about it, like, but Shane was a good mediator, and Shane's gone on to become a counselor, like a psychotherapist. So he actually gave us, he kind of sensed there was a tiny bit of tension, and preempting his future in counseling, massaged the situation a bit and, you know, stroked egos where he needed to. And we got on great. From that day, we've been kind of almost inseparable. Like, I love the man. He's one of my best friends. And I couldn't do bad rep without him. We very much bring two different elements to it, like, you know, but and that, like, that's, I'd forgotten about the fight because Kieran reminded me. I was like, oh, I forgot about that. He's like, right, now I remember the damage that we started from. But like, the bad reputation thing comes from the Thin Lizzy thing, and that's where we first clicked. So we were sitting down and saying, what are we going to call it? What are we going to call our promotion collective? What are we going to call it? And we went, what band can we all agree we liked? And we went around, and like a few bands came out. Obviously, Sabbath came out, Maiden came out, Tin Lizzy came out. I mean, well, we should probably go with the Irish one, Tin Lizzy. And literally just randomized the playlist and went, we'll hit this until one of them works. And a few came up that wouldn't work, like Cowboy Song came up. I was like, we're not going to call it Cowboy Song Promotions. Boys Are Back in Town obviously came up. I was like, can't call yourself that either. Both of those make you sound like a gay night. So we stuff. Bad Reputation came up then, and like the imagery and everything like that was a collective effort. And we all had the tattoo. We all had the bat tattoo on our legs. Me, Kieran, and Shane. We got it for the 5th anniversary. Shane had actually left at that point. He was living abroad, but he came back for a few weeks to go to our 5th anniversary show, which was in the Blind Pig. We've come a good bit from there. Good story for you about the Blind Pig. I'll tell it to you in a minute, actually. But if you want it, that is. If you want stories.
Oh, yeah. That was a narrow spot from what I remember. We ran a gig there, Jesus, when I was like 19 for college. It was like you go down the stairs, and it's nearly smaller than the Casbah, I'd say, down there. Like, well, it's not there anymore, I don't think.
It's gone, yeah. Well, they made it into a restaurant, and I haven't actually been in it since it's been into a restaurant. But like the Blind Pig made bad rep. It didn't. Not giving them credit, but if we survived some of the stuff we got through there and developed the Siege from there, we were fairly, touch wood, we're fairly resilient after that. And Kieran and I are fairly resilient as well, like, because it's happened over the years that, and like, it's very sneaky, but because there's two of us, you'll often get bands trying to pitch one against the other. One of us, Kieran said we could do this. John said we could do this. And like, Kieran and me always have each other's backs. We'll always we're not going to fucking, it's almost like the mafia trust kind of thing. It's called, we have that. We've signed the pact. You know, as in, you never betray the family. Never betray the family. I'm rewatching The Sopranos at the moment, so never betray the family. But the Blind Pig was such a great idea when it started, and a lot of credit to the owners at the time. The managers at the time. It was such a great idea, and for the first few weeks, it was really, when you saw the old heads coming in, it was like Limerick had the high stool back, the heyday of the high stool. Like, the high stool died at death towards the last 2 or 3 years of its life, but people always forget that. But it was such a buzz. It was like a rock bar. Everyone's like, we've got our own fibbers now, blah, 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 you know, yeah. And even though people in Dublin, the most real metalers seem to hate fibbers for some reason, I don't know.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone to praise it now from the pale.
I don't mind. I've gone on nights out there and had fun. I've also had terrible nights out there, but you know, it's grand, you know. When you don't have a rock bar, like, because Galway has a rock bar, Cork has a rock bar, and Dublin has rock bars, Belfast has rock bars. Limerick has only ever had transient rock bars, but we've a better live music scene. So I think you do kind of lose one for the sake of the other, because the fair weather fan will much rather go to their rock night where they're going to hear Guns N' Roses, Zeppelin, Aerosmith. God forbid they're going to hear Disturbed. those things, and they won't go to the show. And there's definitely a few people in Limerick just come to the shows expecting for it to be non-stop Pantera start to finish.
Oh yeah.
And we get people that come to Pantera shows saying, I wish there was more metal in Limerick. I have a running poll
Oh
with a few
yeah.
lads.
Yeah. I've been witness to people saying that. I remember that annoyed me for a short spell. It was way more prevalent about 3 or 4 years ago, where there'd be loads of the covers gig, and if there was something at the Casbah, it'd be like half capacity. I used to get so fucking annoyed by that for the longest time. It's gotten way better though in the last few years, and I think weirdly enough though, since Cork's scene is kind of, this is going to sound really patronizing, I don't mean it to, but do you know the way they kind of had a resurgence, and they kind of got, everyone collectively got their shit together, more bands started forming, gigs were happening regularly again. It seems that the attendance in Limerick got better after that, for whatever reason. That was just something I noticed now.
The covers gigs kept us afloat a lot of years during the recession. I'm not going to lie, they balanced the books. They kept Dolan's happy. They made other gigs happy. Made other gigs happen, not happy. And I think they're necessary. I think unless you're a big time and you've got millions of people to draw on, you need to have the Guns N' Roses tribute at least once a year,
for sure,
because it's guaranteed you're going to get a capacity crowd, and that's free advertising for you for your other shows. So you up your posters in the toilets, you up your posters everywhere. You have more conversations with people that you only see. Like, case in point, Pantera tributes in town. I go up and say, well, these guys are kind of like Pantera. This band gig coming up, they're not. They're fucking not. But they'll be like, really? Yeah. And then they might come to the show, and they might discover that they like more bands than just Pantera. You need to give those gateway events. The gateway events are important. People, and I've said this, and sometimes people disagree with me. I can't afford to be elitist with gigs and stuff like that. You need to realize people don't have the same taste in music all the time. When you're talking to Dahi, that's all fine. He's running a specific label for specific music, and he comes at it from the point that he wants to stay within a niche market. When I'm talking to Dara in Invictus, he has a specific remit, and that's all he works in. And those people can talk shit about other genres and other things like that, because it's okay for them to do that. But if I start yes, I'm not going to be putting on new metal all the fucking time, but every now and again you need to put on a new metal show, because
just that bit of variety, do you know what I mean?
And last 2019 when we did that POD in an Amferm show, that was spectacularly good.
The turnout was meant to be brilliant for that.
It's sold out. It's sold out. But even the production level, the people involved, there was a few head melters at it for sure. People that you were like, why are you associated with the genre of music I like? But it satiated such a section of this side of the country that they can't say we didn't. They're like, oh, why don't you never do? I said, we had POD and Alien Farm in 2019. And my favorite one is when somebody says, well, you should get bands like Parkway Drive over. Parkway Drive played Dolan's Warehouse at an all ages show in 2014. It was 2014, I might be wrong. And it was an all ages show, and there was maybe 150 people at it.
Jesus.
Yeah. People don't. There's lots of shows that kind of happened over the years. Sure, go back before us. Stone Sour played Dolan's. Stone Sour. Corey Taylor was in Dolan's. And I'd say that was pre. I was actually in transition year at that point. So that'll tell you how long ago it was. That was before I was ever doing anything. I was just a skinny little goth kid.
No, I think the thing that would annoy me about that, and I don't mean it in any type of elite spare or anything like that. You'll always have kind of older people who don't really go to gigs anymore because they have kids and stuff like that, and that's understandable. What used to annoy the fuck out of me though about that, and you kind of see it a small bit with the Siege too. Now, before I say what I'm about to say, I love the fact that everyone and anyone goes to the Siege, because it makes for a great kind of melting pot of different people, and that's why
you do see the clicks though, which is great crack.
Yeah, you definitely do, you know what I mean? But I have mates now that would come from I would have mates that would come down from Dublin, and they won't really integrate outside of they might mix with my own close group of friends or whatever like that, but they won't really mix with any other people that are there. the funniest memories I have from being at a Siege, like, are the ones where, like, I'm with some techno hippie I've never met in my life that's going to the art college on one side of me. I'm with a 45-year-old man in an iron sweater who's ended up here by mistake. The rugby was on downstairs and now he's just up and enjoying things, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But the thing that used to annoy me about the attendance being so good for the covers gigs and it being kind of smaller for, let's say, like Casby gigs and stuff like that, was it more kind of people my own age that they just weren't coming out for original bands? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there ever a point, because there's years between us now, like, but when you would look at my own age group and everything like that, and you're there, and like all the lads of my own age are all just sharing like metal things all the time and everything like that, when you
Mm.
see a demographic like mainly going to like cover gigs and not going to like original band gigs, does that ever get frustrating from your end? Because I know as a puncher now, I get annoyed when I notice that. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. There's a certain group of people that you're not going to get to go to because they view music as just entertainment. It's
Mm.
not cultural for them. Like the heavy metal isn't. Heavy metal is cultural. It's music, and there's arguments on forums all across the internet since the dawn of forums about is heavy metal cultural or is it just music? Yeah, of course, it's just a genre of music. I get that,
Mm.
but there's a cultural element to it as well across all genres. There's a style. There's all this sort of stuff. There's all those elements to it that are important, so important to a lot of people, depending on what tribe you're in. And I think a lot of the people in the tribute band who just go to tribute shows don't buy into that. They are Bon Jovi fans.
Yeah.
As in that they like what they like. They're the people that have the one Metallica t-shirt, the one Guns N' Roses t-shirt, the one, and
Mm.
to them it was great. It was when they were young. It's nostalgia mode. When they were young,
Mm.
oh, it was great. Oh, it was great. I went to all the gigs and all the venues. And you do get that when a few people have a few drinks. And me saying this, if somebody's listening, will probably curtail it a bit. That when people get that Dutch courage, they come up and tell you about how great they were back in the day when they
Mm.
went to see Guns N' Roses at Slane. When they traveled to London to gigs, they got the ferry over to see
Yeah.
Motley Crue. And they go on about that. And I like those stories, it's great. But like, let's call a spade here. I mean, like the music scene is good now, but like if we grew up in the 80s, we would have seen like Lizzie playing in fucking
Yeah.
Boris Kane.
Yeah.
There would have been a certain, but like, yeah, there was less metalers around the culture. It was harder to get stuff like that. There's swings and roundabouts, all this sort of stuff. But it does frustrate me initially. It doesn't really frustrate me anymore. You can win some of them over, but I find that a lot of the people that just go to tribute shows aren't interested in expanding their ear. They will listen to bands that have become popular. So perfect example here is that when Blackstone Cherry came to town in 2018.
It was 2018. Yeah. That was summer
Um,
2018. Yeah.
Yeah, great show, nice lads. And the single biggest gift of kindness I've seen out of any member of the band was I forget his name, the singer of the band had some vaping sponsorship and he just gave a guy at the end of the night hundreds of euros worth of vape stuff. And your man was bawling, crying. Just gave it to him. And he was like, yeah, they were a really nice crowd. But
Yeah.
that gig was a gig where I saw the tribute people going to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled aside, I'm friends with someone. I pulled aside a woman that I know that only really goes to her tribute shows. Like anytime we announce a tribute show, she'll comment on it or she'll not share it. She'll do something. It's fine. That's her wheelhouse. We've had chats about it. I don't begrudge her. And I just had to ask her, why are you at this one? And it's because they were a band that came up as referenced to the bands she liked, and they played an accessible kind of blues, rock, metal kind of crossover thing.
Mm.
And there was that sort of large commercial element to them that they were easier, like they were on Kerrang, they were on Scuds, they were on stuff. Whereas when you're putting on Gospel of the Horns, I'm not going to be like, you should come and see this underground death metal band that I have on in the basement.
Yeah.
Or, and like a gig, a good one that we actually, like, you can game it a bit. Like, so when Destroyer 666 played, that was our first gig back that year. And it was 2 gigs, Dublin and Limerick. And I grafted selling tickets for that one because I was like, I want to have a good crowd for this. I know it'll be a good show, and it'll be good to like kick off the year. But I almost had to like convince people that they'd like it.
Yeah.
Just give them a listen. You're like, no. I said, you like Overkill, you like all this sort of, speed, death, trash, all that sort of stuff. Like, you're always talking about Venom, you're always talking about blah blah.
That's the perfect mix of the two there. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. They come up talking about that, and then like, you're like, just give this a chance. And
yeah.
I did that times. I did that with the Memoriam gig as well. Like you seen, I was like, they're like, oh, I like Boltroar. I was like, well, these are the lads from Boltroar. Will they do Boltroar songs? No, this is a new band.
Yeah.
They won't be doing Boltroar songs. And like that was a bit more old school in the promotion, because I think I was approaching an older school audience. Like, as in, I think Facebook and Instagram ads are grand, but after a certain amount of time, they fall on deaf ears. So there is a kind of a rise of the old school promotion again, which is forums, which I really need to get better on because I've gone bad on them again. What do I have to advertise at the moment? Which is forums and, good poster design. I've always been about good poster design. I split my sides laughing when I see a bad poster for a gig, and I'm like, well, there's you, but your best foot forward for a gig there, really. As a promoter, like, get a good poster, get it out there, actually print the fucking posters. Don't just put them up online. Find places to put them. Don't get somebody else to put them up, because they'll put them up someplace illegally, and you'll get a letter saying you were littering, which has happened to me.
And then you lose out in the posters. Then
you lose out in the posters. Yeah. And plus, what we started doing with the Siege was I just printed more posters because they kept getting taken down. And I just said to people, and I know the people that take them down, I went, I'll just give you a poster at the Siege. I'll just give you a poster at the Siege. Like every Siege, and I love watching it. We watch it back on the cameras, and there's a few people from your crew responsible.
Oh, I know exactly who.
But we see it happening, which is absolutely bad, where they try to sneakily take down the big A0 posters, and I'm like, you're as subtle as a brick through the face.
And you'd wonder why all the same they don't just ask, like, because it's I like you said earlier, I'm not going to name him shame, but it's not exclusive to Limerick. I've seen that happen when Mayhem played the Academy one. There was like this thing of upcoming events, and like normally that has like a thing of glass.
That was another band that was meant to play Limerick, by the
way. Oh no way! Was that around the same tour, or?
No, it was another tour, but it just didn't work out.
Do you know something? I would not be surprised now if because they were due to play again, like, Jesus, is it March or something they rescheduled it for? I would not be surprised if Mayhem tried to branch out and do more than one Irish state after the last. Like, they were so quick to announce another Irish state after the last one. Like,
yeah. It strikes me as a band that are trying to get as many gigs in because they're going to announce they're done soon, I think.
That's it.
Maybe in 2 or 3 years,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you. And like, to be honest, I thought they would try and milk as much tour dates as possible out of, like, they had the movie come out and everything like that. But on top of that, they had a few releases from, like, Christ, I can't remember it now, but it was like, I have it up here on the shelf and I can't think of the name of it. But they released, like, they got a hold of old bootleg stuff, like all the old all the old Mayhem bootlegs, like the live bootlegs, they all came out re-released and refurbished and all that kind of crack. But the I think they're not the Soundhouse tapes, that's the Maiden one, but it's like the rehearsal tapes with Dead. They came out and they did a DVD and stuff like that, but that all was coming out around the same time. There was a huge resurgence in popularity from. But I was surprised that I'd be very surprised if they didn't try to milk that into the ground when they come back. Like sorry, I don't know, I'm after going on a tangent again, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a Limerick date or a Cork gig the next time.
Hopefully, yeah. Hi now, don't say Cork, it's us. Only messing. Look, I think with Cork coming back the way it's going, there is going to be gigs going to Cork. Like that's the thing. Yeah.
It's just a pity they don't like Iron Maiden down there. That's the only thing. Like, you know what I mean?
That, yeah. And I had a message. Dahi doesn't like wolves in the throne room.
There's a few don't like wolves in the throne room now. I like them too. I don't know where that came from though. That just seems to be a recent thing where people are shitting all over them. But I don't see the reason for it. Like, I think they're fucking fantastic. Like,
there was a band supporting them. They played Limerick in 2012, and there was a band supporting called Wolf Serpent with a V. Wolf Serpent. They were. I know, yeah, but that was before that became way too common. But they were really good, and I think they just kind of. I actually haven't looked up and see if they've gone anywhere, but they were really cool. They were a couple. They were a two-piece, but they were a couple, and they were gas. They were like really down to earth. They did all their talk about DIY. They printed all their own merch. They did everything themselves, like, which is cool.
I must ask you one more thing now, because I'm just looking at the time and I don't want to keep you too long because I don't know if you're working tomorrow or not. The one thing I want to ask you before I ask you the final question, I'm organising a small little panel thing for Siege Stories. I'm aiming to release them the Thursday and Friday before Easter Sunday. I know you guys are probably going to do the podcast again on the Sunday, but we have a panel. The panel's already put together of just regular gig goers. They're going to be on the Thursday episode, and we're looking for a few from inside Limerick that want to be on the Friday episode. It's just going to be sharing stories about the siege for an hour or so on an episode of the podcast. Does that sound like something you're up for?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll get Kieran in on that as well, because it's good to we're good to have together because we bounce stuff off each other. Yeah, that's cool. If you'll have Kieran as well, that is.
Oh yeah, no, totally. And Kieran's one that I want to get on for an interview at some point as well. Like, do you know what I mean? I just said I'd ask you on the air now, just so to put that added bit of pressure on it. Like, do you know what I mean? I want to mess it. But no, it'd be very informal. It'll just be like a cyber pub type of thing. Like, do you know what I mean? There might be 4 or 5 of us on. Like the episode you'd be on now, but lads from bands would be on that episode. Like, do you know what I mean? I'll probably get one of the boys from Zelo Cult and stuff on for that. But the last question I wanted to ask you before I let you go, is there anything you want to say to the crowds and the gig goers for the last few years before you get back going? Sorry, is there anything you want to say to the lads that are regularly going to gigs in the months before you get back on? Anything you want to say to them?
I can honestly say it's the first time I've ever been asked that. It's good. Not that it's a bad thing, but it'll take me a second to think.
Because that was one thing I wanted to ask you about more, because it's like, you know, when you're interviewed, it's always about like the bands and Dolans and stuff like that. And I know there's 101 kind of stories you have from the crowd and everything like that, but that'd be a podcast in itself.
I've made the best friends in my life I've made through putting on gigs and meeting people at it. And then what's really nice to see, and you see it a few times, is like there's the lads from Ennis that come into all our shows are, you know, stalwarts. You know, there's a pile of them, so I don't want to leave anyone out. Always, you know, but you know who I'm talking about.
Well, I have to name PJ as well in that one now. He's always on the stool every time in the Casbah. He's always there, and it doesn't matter what type of gig it is. He's always there for it. Like,
no, PJ. I didn't want to go. Yeah, but PJ in particular, I didn't want to go name him. You named him, so it's all right.
I won't get in trouble if I name him. Like,
but there's 4 or 5, 3 in particular that come into a regular amount of shows. I've done since nearly day one, you know. And what's always nice is when you announce a show, and there's always a trepidation about is this going to sell? Like, you think something's going to sell, you know. Like the one I was really excited about that didn't happen was Blood Incantation, and like that was all, like that was my contacts and stuff. So like there was no middlemen there. And I was so excited about that. I got a message from somebody who doesn't like being mentioned because I mentioned them before, but they messaged me saying, "Don't worry, I'll buy 5 tickets as soon as it goes on sale." And I was like, how bloody nice is that?
Yeah.
It's like, can everyone do that, please?
Yeah.
Just to kind of, because there's always people are like, "Oh, I'll buy it on the day." It's the most Irish thing ever, because when you talk to European crowds, it's funnily enough when Steve Harris is playing Limerick, and I keep name dropping here, but I don't fucking care. When Steve Harris is playing Limerick, one of the lads from Neffelheim, one of the twins, I forget which one it was actually, because they were both there, or were they both there? Memory's a bit foggy. Was commenting on the fact that the show hadn't sold out before Steve, and I was like, "Oh, I don't understand it either." He said, "What's wrong with the Irish?" You know, as in, because Dublin was the same, everywhere was the same. They all pretty much sold out in the day, but nobody would just buy the fucking tickets in advance. Yeah. It's the most Irish thing ever. So I appreciate our fans over the years that have consecutively come to shows, have bought the tickets in advance, or make the effort. And what I've also liked is your gang, and you kind of brought them up a while ago. Like, there's a few years between us, but I've seen you coming from the 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old that were to come to the Siege and, hung out and stuff like that, and blah, 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 gone through your trash phase, all that. and all of you were and then like you started going to the Rabbit Bitch shows, and I was always guaranteed that Rabbit Bitch would have a good crowd, and they love coming to Limerick as a result of it, and like they're a great band and stuff like that. But that there is that consistency with coming, and I think if you don't invest in your crowds or your audience or the members of your audience, you don't pay them back by saying, okay, we'll this person has been coming to our shows for ages. They've been talking about this sort of band. They want to come. Let's see if we can get this band to come. Let's, because I know it'll work. Blah blah blah. And just give them the time of day as well. There's, from knowing a lot of promoters in Ireland, most of them are sound and will talk to fans, but that's not the case across Europe. Like,
I will believe it.
We get bands that are coming in going, oh, you're talking to us. And you're like, yeah. And like the hospitality, like, oh, you have the heating on. Yeah. Jesus, we're getting our rider. You're like, yeah, I signed a contract. And they're like, all right. And they'll have horror stories mainly from mainland England. I'm not going to lie. Mainland England being just England, not Scotland and Wales, by the way. Just not calling it the mainland. They're just delighted with the treatment, and I think we have that with the people that come in as well. Like the staff in Dolan's, unless you're acting the complete fucking dickhead, are generally very sound to you.
God, yeah. Can't praise them enough. They're genuine. Even the security lads are the nicest ever. That's another one actually I need to get on his podge at some point. That would be an absolute solid episode of the podcast.
He has some gas stories,
I'd well believe it. Like,
you should definitely get Podge on. He'd love it. He's good. He's good for that sort of stuff, full of the stories as well. I have a question for you. What's been your favorite show we've done?
Oh Jesus, the go-to one now, and I'm not going to use this one because it's the easy answer. Would have been the church gig a year ago. That was fantastic. That was brilliant crack. With the benefit of hindsight now, Christ, I probably have the lineup of this wrong, but I remember it was the first time I got to see Stereo Nasty, and it was a band called Nighthawks was actually headlining the gig, and that was one of the fucking loudest gigs. I remember sitting on a stool at the bar. It was one of the first times I could actually go to one of the gigs like legally, like where I wasn't being chucked out, like, do you know what I mean? Because I'm too young, which I never would have tried anyway. But I remember sitting down and I was sitting behind PJ, and I remember that I was only about I was just turned 18 years of age, and I remember thinking to myself, I had like an elderly moment at like 18. I remember being, geez, this is very fucking loud now. Like, outside of that though, like I always remember the first siege I was at, like prior to spring 2013 would have been that one.
I can't remember who headlines them now anymore. So
Jesus, no, it's
but based on the year, I just have to tell me, and I go, all right, that one.
Because I remember walking in, and I don't know who it was playing. It was some grindcore band was playing, and I remember I was wearing like fucking boggers, raincoat, a Nike t-shirt, those farmers jeans, and a pair of runners. Like, you know, all I was into at that stage was like Black Album, Metallica, and Sabbath's greatest hits. Like, but I remember there was some grindcore band playing, and their vocalist was holding 2 SM58s in his hand. He was off the stage, going up screaming into people's faces and everything like this. And I remember just turning and walking around to me like, do you know something? I like a bit of this now. Like, do you know what I mean? But that was actually the point I wanted to finish on, though. And I think it's like a nice point to finish on. You mentioned it, is now that you guys have been doing the bad rep thing for so long, and as you mentioned, you've actually seen, and it's not even just my own age group, there's probably a few small bit older than me and a few a little bit younger. You have seen a generation of people actually get into metal, and you've vicariously been responsible for them getting into metal, because had it not been for the siege and stuff like that, I probably never would have gotten into like death metal and black metal and grindcore, and I never would have. Like, there is very much a thing to be said about actually getting invested in the scene. Just because lads aren't playing in bands and stuff like that, and lads aren't running gigs, doesn't mean that you can't not get involved. Like stuff like this, doing the podcasts, involved with the zines and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it's the community elements of those gigs and the encouragement of like wanting to be involved and everything like that. That was one thing that hit me from the get-go when I started going to gigs, and that's something that yourself and Kieran are very, very much responsible for. Like, do you know what I mean? That's you're the ones to thank for that. Like, for a lot of us, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like Emmett, you speaking, I suppose, out of the metal thing. You're like, and thanks for those kind words. Really, I do really appreciate it. The one thing I'm often told is I often sound sarcastic. And if you think I sound sarcastic, you should meet my brother. And if you think he sounds sarcastic, you should meet my dad. Where it's just a thing. But I am genuinely thank you. I do appreciate it.
Not a bother.
But like you come from, and I think you're doing a degree at the moment in it. But like the community work background, like as in understanding community values, and like I know. On the darker side of metal, it's all like nihilism and but like that's not going to happen. Those shows aren't going to happen with some strong community values. Without them. You need networks. You need to establish community. You need to value the people that are parts of it, and you need to respect, like that things need to be nurtured. So you need to nurture new young people coming into gigs and stuff like that. Like I fight for the Siege to stay underage up until 5-6 p.m. I fight tooth and nail for that to happen. And then you get the angry metaler going, why are the kids here? And I'm like, well, that kid, like you said, could be discovering your band for the first time.
Literally,
and expanding their ears. Like up until that, music is curated for you for what you hear to a certain point, and you need to be exposed. As in, like I often say, convert them young. That's what you need to do. And it's important. Like I'm like. The Siege, when we opened the warehouse, and there was one in particular because we opened it a few minutes late, and then we opened the merch, and the rush for the merch, and it wasn't just for Siege stuff; it was for all the merch, as in for bands and stuff, because there was that element of going, well, this is where it starts. Yes, come 6 p.m., I want those fuckers to get out because the party has to start. But that's like I'm sure I wouldn't remember it, but. Because I've always been over 18 with Siege. But I'm sure for you, there came the point where you were finally 18 and could stay on with the Siege. Like I know for a fact, Grode Murphy has told me his story about when he was finally 18 and could stay on with the Siege. If he tells it to me one more time. And he could finally stay. And like Podge will tell you some funny stories about the first 18-year-old Grode Murphy Siege. What Siege that was. But like lovely fella, great, really good music fan, and honest, my God, honest. He'll tell you when he's not going to a gig and why he's not going to a gig.
Oh yeah. And he'll apologize 110 times for it, and you have to be kind of like, no, it's okay. You don't have to go to these things, like,
Yeah. But I think I'll fall out with him now if I don't book CKY in the next 10 years.
I'm not missing. He asked me after episode 1 to book him for the podcast. I have that message screenshotted. As soon as it landed in, I was just like, I'll hold him to that now. Like,
yeah. Sure, look, they're best us.
That's it. Sure, here. Go on. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say thanks, and it's great. Like as in, there's comments been made about podcasts, and like a few people said it, and we're joking about that. Like podcasts are filling the live music void in lots of ways. So it's cool, man. I wish you all the best with this venture, and thanks for having me on.
Not a bother. I'll tell you really quickly before we go exactly why the reason for this podcast started, though, because my old lad actually asked me this. As we mentioned at the start of the podcast, that's the thing I miss the most about gigs is those conversations you have with people between bands at this when you're arriving to Dolan's, when you're leaving, you know what I mean, running to get the bus. And I remember talking to Dahi just before, about a week or so before we recorded the interview, and he was asking me what the aim was with the podcast. And literally, to be honest with you, the whole purpose of the podcast is to recreate the conversation we have in the smoking area of a pub. That's exactly the reason for it. So I'd imagine once gigs actually start going back again, I don't know whether or not there'd be a need for this, like, do you know what I mean?
No, I listen to podcasts when I'm doing, like, because in every job there's a certain amount of admin. So when I'm doing my admin, I stick the headphones in and I listen to podcasts because I can't, like, I listen to music when I'm relaxing, but I listen to podcasts when I'm working. That's my balance. That's how I do it. I like it. So I'm a long mate last for you, dude.
John, thanks very much for hopping on, man. And sure, look, when stuff is back up and again, hold me to this, I'll owe you a pint of Guinness when the next gig is back on.
Perfect. I will hold you to that.
All right, perfect stuff.